Welcome to Main Street Podcast, an opportunity to talk to Idaho's elected leaders about the issues that matter to you. Welcome to Main Street Idaho. We're fortunate today to have a Senator Geoff Schroeder out of District 8 joining us today. Senator Schroeder, thanks for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Now, Senator, from District 8, for those who might not be incredibly literate at where all the districts are, what exactly is the area that you represent?
District 8 is Custer County, Valley County, Boise County, and Elmore County. So it's almost 14,000 square miles in the heart of Idaho. It includes, well, I like to claim it's the most scenic district in the state. I claim that I came up with it first. Representative Blanksmith thinks she did. So in any event, we have the Sawtooth Mountains, we have McCall, and all the national forests in Boise County, Elmore County's beauty. Anyway, that's the...
Wow. And Senator, is that the largest district in Idaho, legislative district?
Largest legislative district in acreage, or square miles.
Okay. Well, today we'll have to get into some of the challenges that come with that. But currently, you're located in what city?
I live in Mountain Home, and I've lived there for 33 years. And so lived in Mountain Home 33 years. The law firm that I work for is in Boise, but their representation is statewide, representing local governments and cities across the state.
Now, currently in Mountain Home, from what I understand, though, born and raised is in Central Idaho, right? You're local.
I grew up in Kamiah. So my parents moved there in 1971. My dad got a job right out of college teaching junior high school in Kamiah. So I've lived there since, I went kindergarten through 12th grade in Kamiah and graduated from Kamiah. I went to school at the University of Idaho. Had the inevitably, well, maybe not always inevitable, but the not quite as successful as we would have liked first semester. Spent a little time working, returned in 1986 for my first successful semester. And it was at that point that I ran out of the money I had saved to go back to school and join the National Guard to try to pay for school.
You mean to tell me you didn't just max out student loans and hope that the government was going to pay for it?
No, I had to wait till I went to law school to do that. But no,
now
both of those boxes.
Now, Senator, serving in the Idaho National Guard, I think that probably gives you some unique experience in the Senate. Why don't you walk us through your decision to join the Idaho National Guard and what that experience was like?
That's a little, so it was, it kind of informed the rest of my career in the Guard. And it was my roommate and I were successful in college. We were having a good time, but we had a tough time finding part-time work. And the job market in 1986 in Moscow, Idaho was a lot different than it is now. And so it was difficult. There was a lot of competition for the few jobs that were available. He got a job driving for the bus company. I never did get on with that, but we went into the armory, talked to the recruiter, and kind of couldn't, it's like, you kidding? We go to basic, and then we get paid, and you pay for student loans, and you get the GI Bill, and okay. So I remember telling my dad, and it's like, well, if you're sure you want to do it. And so it worked. I got a ton of money. It was still largely the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the summer sort of a thing. It was really interesting because the Idaho National Guard is its 116th Engineer Battalion has deployed in every major conflict since the Spanish-American War. So there were people in our unit that had been in Vietnam. In 1988, when I was working there, a gentleman came into the armory named Clifford Ott. He had been in the Guard for the Spanish-American War and World War I. He foot marched to Boise to get on the train to go deploy to Europe and to he wasn't in the Spanish-American War, I said, but Pancho Villa and World War I. So that
wow.
The unit crest in Moscow, or in the Engineer Battalion, is the key, the castle, and the cactus. The key is the key to the city of Angers, France, from their service in World War I. The castle is the Pancho Villa, and the cactus is Pancho Villa, and the castle is the Spanish-American War. And so I met a living person who was in the unit I was in when they did the things that led to that unit crest.
Wow. Now that what like rich history there. When you signed up, did you expect that you also would be participating in active duty conflicts?
So this was the height of the Cold War, 1986. So war meant the end of, nuclear winter, all these, because the Soviet Union was the biggest threat to our country. You probably could say they remain that way. They're not the Soviet Union anymore, but
Sure.
war was kind of a distant thought. It was like, well, probably, maybe, but I spent the bulk of my enlistment in the military training to fight the Cold War and training to fight in Europe, and basically retraining tactics from the Vietnam War, squad tactics through, I was a supply clerk when I first enlisted. So, but everybody has to know basic infantry tactics. And so, but the Idaho Guard played a real important role, and still does, in their local communities. And my first 2-week summer camp was to renovate or to take care of the mine tailings from the Continental Mine in Boundary County, Idaho. So we went and took a 2-week summer camp, convoyed all the way to Bonner's Ferry. Actually, I had to drive through Canada to get there, and then spent 2 weeks where the dump trucks and bulldozers that our engineer battalion had took away mine tailings and replaced them with topsoil. We'd have to stop occasionally because of grizzly bears, and it was just quite an experience working alongside people who have been in Idaho forever and who had been through deployments to Vietnam with this unit, working side by side. Glenn Smith, my company commander, John Rugg, John Schneider, who was the postmaster in Orofino. Those folks all were from that local area, and we're still in the Guard in the 80s. And back to your question about did I anticipate that, when the Iraq War came up, John Rugg was still in the Idaho National Guard, still in the 116th Engineer Battalion. And Lewiston Morning Tribune did an article about him deploying again to Iraq. And that was part of it.
And that was what, 20 years later?
Yeah, 2004.
Wow. Yeah. And you joined. You also had a deployment in Iraq, correct?
Yes. So, but at the time the Iraq War hit, I was recruiting. I was a recruiter in Mountain Home. Had enlisted quite a few people from the town, and saw the a maintenance unit in Iraq get lost and then get taken prisoner. And I thought, that's kind of the same outfit we have in Mountain Home. We're mechanics. We're, I felt an obligation to make good on I was incentivized to join the Guard to pay for school and to pay for college, and I did it for that. It became a full-time job, which is a different topic, I guess. But in any event, here I am the recruiter, and here are folks who have joined to pay for school and this sort of thing. And now we're actually getting called up to do the thing that we've all trained to do. And I wanted to make sure that I guess I was a part of that, and that I was there on the ground to see how it was going, and that the skills that you need to be able to survive versus getting lost, knowing how to run a convoy, knowing how to stay in communication with people. I just wanted to make sure that I was a part of making sure those mistakes weren't made, like I was watching unfold live on television in front of me.
So you felt a sense of, call it duty or obligation, to actually go over there and serve in the sand.
Yeah, Northern Iraq isn't as sandy. It looks a lot but yeah.
Yeah. Now, that's gotta have given you a very unique perspective in serving in the Senate. There's probably not a lot of people in the Idaho legislature who have, served in the military. There's a few of you, but as a veteran, how has that affected the way that you view policymaking in Idaho?
Well, I think the biggest driving thing that I took away when I left that, returned from that deployment, was an event that occurred right after we arrived, and that was their first set of elections. So Iraqis, did under Saddam Hussein, didn't have free and fair elections. They didn't, to the extent they had them, the tickets were already marked. The party had already picked who you got to vote for. When the party picks who you get to vote for, you don't have very many choices. So you have these elections with 98% or 99% and this sort of thing. And so one of the things that had been set up was for the Iraqis to form their own government. And it required elections at a local level, city elections, precinct elections, to elect the people who would go form the Iraqi constitution. Those elections were the last week of January in 2005. And there was a lot of threat that there would be people who wanted to disrupt those elections, people who wouldn't like the outcome of those elections because the results weren't predicated on skewing who got to be on the ballot. So you see a lot of ballots with a lot of names hanging up around the city, I guess. And so we were told this is going to be a big event, and there's a huge threat of disruption, people seeking to disrupt the elective process or the results. And so it was kind of an all hands on deck. I was in motor sergeant for the brigade headquarters company. I had 20 mechanics. And they're like, everybody's going out in the city off of our base, and you're all going to backstop the Iraqi police. So instead of American soldiers at polling places, it would be Iraqi police at polling places, but the soldiers would help guard the police stations. And so I and 12 of my soldiers were on the rooftop of the Kirkuk traffic police building. Another half of my motor pool was on the rooftop of another police building in Iraq for 5 days. And we had a front row seat to watch how they conducted those elections and to make sure that people obeyed the curfew and weren't out when driving around after dark when they weren't supposed to. And there was some conflict. But what I took away that I found the most impressive was the morning of the elections. No one could drive anywhere, and everyone was walking, and people were coming out of their homes over the threat of actual physical violence. There were people who were threatened. If you vote in this election, we don't want you to participate. And everyone had to stick their fingers in ink when they voted. And so I have a ton of pictures that I took during those 5 days. And the tail end is a bunch of people with ink-stained fingers. That would prevent them from voting twice. But people facing the threat of a real threat of violence in a semi-chaotic country. Kirkuk is a city of 700,000 people, or was in 2005. So it's not a small city. But here they were. I'm going to go vote because they had the opportunity to vote that they hadn't had for 50 years.
Wow.
And so for me, voting, that really sticks with me to this day. People were joking. I took a picture of an Iraqi guy holding his finger up. You can see it on my Facebook page. But every primary election, I would put, have you voted? He did. He did when he was threatened to be killed for having that ink-stained finger. So when people monkey with elections or election processes, I get a little wound up. And so that's one of the more pivotal things that informs my local elections at the local level are the place where government is the most responsive to the people. They're the most important elections, and it's important that people be able to participate in those.
Wow. I think that's a fantastic description of the importance of elections and voting. I'm moved by that. I appreciate you sharing that experience. I know our veterans are not always in a place to share their experiences of what happened over there, but wow, what a great message there. Let's talk about local elections, right? So you've taught us about the importance of voting and what some have been willing to do to get to the ballot box. You served in local government, correct? You were on the city council?
Yes. So right after I retired, there was a Mountain Home City Council election, and I decided to run. I've lived there the Guard moved me there in 1990. So I've lived there for now 33 years. But when I first got there, there was this little Camera 8 local access channel that would come and set up and film city council meetings. So I got invited to participate with that channel, and so I ended up attending a lot of city council meetings just to film it, and then later edit the tape or play the tape for folks. Now we have YouTube and live streaming, so that thing is a little outdated. But I've been involved in and known mayors or city council people through the years, and so I thought, sure, I could step in and offer some insight now that I'm free of the limitations of military service. So I did. I ran and I won, and got elected, and really enjoyed that time on the council. Decided to finish the degree that I had started. So my 20-year Army career took me outside of that for a while. So I was working part-time, and I decided to stop the city council participation and kind of focus on getting that undergraduate degree finished. So I spent 2 years off the council. And in that time, I was working as a consultant, partly for a project for finishing my undergrad degree, and then they hired me for this law firm. So prior to going to law school, and the reason I'm telling this is one of the projects was go to Glens Ferry and help them rewrite their comp plan for zoning. I had not done it before. Susan Buxton, who's now the State Parks and Rec director, was the attorney for Glens Ferry at the time, and she put me on that project. And I had to help shepherd this council and mayor through as an assistant. The legal part of it, the actual practice of law, of course, the firm did, but I attended the P&Z meetings and attended the council meetings to walk through each of the chapters of the comp plan. And what I noticed going to this meeting was this was the first time I dealt with a city council other than one I had served on. And I started to miss it a lot. I was like, here are these people. And here's the part that really struck me then when I first saw it. I was at one of their meetings, and they were debating their budget. And they were debating a budget about how much to pay the librarian. And should it be this much? Should it be this much more? But I realized here we are on a Tuesday night. It's 8:30, and here are this group of 4 people and a mayor, and then their city staff, and they're all sitting here doing their level best to try to keep this city running, to try to keep the streets paved, to keep the library open, run a water treatment facility, a wastewater treatment plant. These are all largely volunteers. They're paid very little, but they're putting their heart and soul, and they're putting their effort into how best to run a city. And it was then that I realized that there's not much difference from one city to another when it comes to the role of that government and the way folks on these city councils treat their responsibility. They're devoted to it. They're passionate about it. It certainly creates conflict in some places, some more aggravated than others. But I realized that this is the heart of our society, that our local governments really are where the action is and where you have the most access and the most influence in making sure that the outcome is that which you want. We need an ordinance to do X or Y or Z. So as a result of that, I ran for a second term on the city council and finished most of it, and then resigned right at the tail end. So anyway.
So, Senator, you describe the impact of local elected leaders and how much they can do in their devotion. What percentage of Idahoans do you think can name their city councilors, though?
I don't know. I think there's a lot. I've thought about this a bit, and it comes up a lot, which is one of the reasons I ran. When you talk about cities in Idaho, there are 200 of them.
200
cities, or one depending on, I think one disincorporated. I'm not sure. The Association of Cities could, but you have the big ones, and so you have cities of 10,000 or higher. Mountain Home is in that group. There's 23 cities of the 199 that have more than 10,000 people in them. 23 of those cities, and but when you get down to those 200, you're going to, yeah, everyone knows their city council person. Everyone knows their mayor, because you run into them at the post office. You run into them at the grocery store. You go to Thanksgiving dinner with them. Clayton has 14 people. I would suspect that a Thanksgiving dinner would require public notice. It's a city an attorney in our office represents. But
wow, 14 people. You said 14 people in Clayton?
yes.
And is that the smallest city in Idaho?
It's not. I think Warm River, I was just looking this up a little bit earlier today, but here's the important part. There are 23 cities over 10,000. There's 11 from 5 to 10,000. And then 27 cities from 2 to 5,000, 22 from 1,000 to 2,000. And here's 43 cities from 500 to 1,000, and another 40 cities from 200 to 500, and 36 are below 200.
Wow.
So when it comes to city government in Idaho, it's all rural by count of cities. And so this gets to another probably a little more technical topic inside baseball or local government thing. But anyway, the idea that cities exist to under a mandate from the Constitution for police power and to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. They incorporate for a reason, to deliver services to the citizens and to help govern and regulate their conduct amongst people who are living in a small area versus scattered out in the countryside, like where I grew up, 8 miles out of town. So what you end up having, and I think what's reflected in some of my literature about why I decided to run, is you have these great big cities that have maybe an inaccessible government. Maybe the top 5 or 6 aren't, they have so many people in that city that the city councilman isn't ready to answer the phone at a moment's notice. But they're the ones that they're the punching bag for what people perceive to be problems with local government, particularly with respect to spending and overspending and property taxes. Oh, these cities are out of control. They're spending so much money. Well, there's a whole bunch of process baked into adopting a budget and spending money. And so the notion that city governments are out of touch with their constituents might hold true for the top 15 or 10 cities. Maybe that's the case, maybe it's not. But I can tell you, as someone who is in the trenches with these cities every single day, that the cities that are at the bottom tier of this, which is the bulk of the cities in Idaho, 22 plus 43 plus 40 plus 36, are below 2,000. That those people are spending exactly as much money as their constituents want them to spend.
So Senator, how does that affect what you've been doing in the Senate? Because you talk about wanting to run to kind of bolster local government and fight for the little guy in Boise's capital. How has that affected what you're doing in the Senate?
Well, the ability of a little city to do the things that it needs to do to function as a city is there by this kind of hybridized grant of power. So in legal realm, a city, you have what's called the Dillon's Rule state, where cities or local governments have only that power granted by the state, or you have home rule states. And Idaho is kind of different. So you have a police power granted. My concern has been, and I've seen over the years from my first term on the city council and through now, efforts to go in and restrain the powers of local governments to do things, and particularly the powers of cities. And those come as a result of some large city having some zoning ordinance or some ordinance that someone runs afoul of, or we had this come up this session. So back in, the late 90s, early 2000s, one of the largest cities in Ada County annexed without permission or without consent a bunch of people. And that turned into an annexation statute that we live with to this day. That is, Byzantine would be one way to describe it, but it's very difficult to navigate, to understand Category A, Category B, Category C. And so there are efforts to try to simplify that. There are efforts to try to rein in other areas that cities can do. I remember in 2015 or 16, the statute was passed. Cities can't regulate garbage bags, minimum wage, I don't know, you name it. Every year there's something that we don't want cities to do. And the targets are always directed at these big cities. Well, the problem is that who has to live with that? Who has to live with those restrictions are the tiny ones as well, where the problem doesn't exist. We wouldn't have thought of banning garbage bags. Who cares? Those examples are a little less problematic. It doesn't matter. But there's other ones that direct how cities adopt budget, how cities are funded. That when your target is the big guy, you're accidentally getting the little guy. So when you restrict growth to a certain percentage or a budget to a certain percentage, and you restrict services to a certain percentage, well, that
Sure.
will affect a tiny city a great deal more than it will a big city. So 8%, if I want to add 30 houses to a city and I need a 30 home subdivision to a city, if that's more than 8% of the total homes in the city, then I'm going to have a problem getting my budget grown enough to deliver the same level of service they had before.
Right. So I think anyone listening can't question your passion or understanding of these local issues. And clearly that's one of the reasons why you ran. So we've talked a lot about the connection here between city and rural and these small unincorporated cities and the way that plays out. You talked earlier about such a vast and diverse district in District 8. Why don't you, as we're running out of time quickly, but why don't you give us a couple examples of the issues that you're hearing about and that you're seeing in District 8 as it's so big and so many issues? Give us a few examples of some of the challenges that your constituents are facing.
So we have, we have a huge diversity. So we have a very agricultural dependent component in Elmore County, where there's the dependent on water is just a tremendous issue.
Sure.
We have rural farms in Custer County as well that require irrigation and irrigation water and water rights. We have in Valley County and in Custer County and Valley County both have tremendous mining resources and mineral resources, and those are under constant scrutiny to make sure that they comply with environmental regulations before they can, either cause a harm or a detriment. And so you're balancing, the needs of the country to produce minerals and the need of the county to have a bustling economy and to provide, but to not be at odds with, for example, the tremendous recreation and scenic values in the city of McCall or the city of Cascade. And so those are tough to wrestle with. Should this mine be approved? Is it going to have the effect that the folks claim that it will? And then, yes, preserving the rural way of life. People move out into the country because that's where they want to live. They don't want to be bothered. They want to be able to shoot out the back door like I did where I was growing up. We make sure no one's behind us, but we lived miles from other people. So when cities grow out into the county, or people want to develop, that rural way of life is important. I grew up in a rural situation. If I was expecting my rural lifestyle and all of a sudden it's encroached by a city or by other growth from my neighbor next door, maybe not in a city, it would concern me. And so those growing pains are prevalent in Valley and Elmore counties, to some extent in Boise County as well. The demands of growth of population on emergency medical services in Boise County, the recreation folks in these counties, and particularly in Valley County. How do you fund that? And there's an effort now that I've seen people criticize, but a statewide solution to EMS funding, I think, is necessary given some property tax value limitations and the expense of medical service in our rural area.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt when you look at these conflicting interests at times and a vocal constituency, you've definitely got your job cut out for you as you figure out what we need to do in those regards. As we're wrapping up, there's a couple questions I have to ask all of our guests, and you with your unique background, I've got to ask you a couple. The first one, if there's a book that you would recommend that everyone out there reads, what book would it be?
Oh boy. I have an answer, but I'm not going to answer it.
Okay.
Well, this came up on a Twitter. This book passed away recently. He's a philosopher. I have a philosophy degree. His name's Harry Frankfurt.
Okay.
And he wrote a book. It's very small, and the title is fun, but don't be fooled by the title. It is a piece of scholarly work. But the book by philosopher Harry Frankfurt is called On Bullshit, and it describes the difference between truth and lies, and then this other notion. And this third thing, which is the title of the book, is a greater enemy of the truth than is a lie. And he does a stunning job of it, and I really think more people ought to read it.
Fantastic. Maybe not a bedtime story for the kids, but definitely one that some of your coworkers and
the lie is someone just talking around something besides giving you an answer that can be verified or falsified. So
fair. Best place to eat in your district. Now, your district is massive, so if you could possibly choose one or two places.
I wouldn't do justice. I will tell you this. Before I had the district and was a senator, before I was a senator, I would have to go to Crouch. I'm the city attorney for the city of Crouch, and our firm is the city attorney for Horseshoe Bend. So Sonora Mexican Grill in Horseshoe Bend, it's a great place to stop and get an enchilada. That's one at that end of the district. There's so many more, but
we'll take that one, and then we'll asterisk it with so many more. Now, Senator, we started today talking about your time signing up in the National Guard, the way you felt an obligation to go serve, and your very compelling story about the importance of voting. We got into some of these local government issues, your time on the city council, the unsung heroes that have so much impact, and a call to serve in local government where possible, and talked about how that's affected not only your reason to run for the Senate, but also the issues you've been carrying. And then you went through quickly, but a list of a lot of issues that your district is experiencing, and with this historic growth, everything going on. You gave us a great book recommendation and a good Mexican restaurant. So, Senator, we've appreciated your time with us today. As we depart, some last-minute words of maybe anything you'd like to leave us with.
Well, I think one of the more important jobs that I have is to listen. There's a lot of us there that like to talk. I have a lot to say, but if I don't stop and listen, and if I don't listen carefully to what someone is saying, so people leave me voicemails, I listen to them, I try to call them back, but I try to listen for what it is that I'm being asked, and whether that's a person who's advocating for a piece of legislation, a colleague, but I try to listen carefully to what people are saying. And so, if you don't think I'm listening, maybe I've missed it and I'm not, and maybe I'm jumping to talking, but I prefer to listen first, listen carefully, and then offer what it is that I have to say.
Fantastic. Well, anybody listening now, that's an open invitation to reach out if you're in District 8 to Senator Geoff Schroeder. Again, District 8. He's open and willing to listen to anything you've got to say to him. Senator, again, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have you back on, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Senator.